Okay, gonna do a video here on a ATV no start condition. This is the ATV that I use on the farm. You've seen it in my other videos, used it dragging deer out and stuff like that. Gets used around the farm. It doesn't get abused. It's got very low miles on it. But the landowner was using it a couple weeks ago. And it started fine, like it always does. Never had any issues starting it. Even in the wintertime, it starts right up. It is a Yamaha 4x4 grizzly. It's a 450 engine. I believe the 400 and the 450 engines are the same, and this is a single cylinder, liquid cooled, 4-stroke. So the landowner was using it a couple of weeks ago. It started fine. It ran a little while. He was going from building to building with it on the farm, and all of a sudden it started running like crap, and then he shut it off, and then when he went to try and restart it, it wouldn't start. It just would crank, no start. So I decided that I found what the problem is on it. It's quite unusual. So I said I'd do a quick video and kind of explain what I did to figure out what was going on with it. Okay, for your combustion engine, internal combustion engine, 4-stroke or 2-stroke to work, you need 3 things. You need compression, you need spark, and you need fuel. If you're missing one of those things, the engine is not gonna run. So those are your basics that you want to start with. Now with a diesel, if you have a diesel quad, a diesel of course doesn't use spark, it uses compression ignition. So you need compression and fuel. The issue with this was when we would try to crank it, it would crank okay. It sounded normal. A lot of times you can tell if the timing is off by how it sounds when it's cranking. So if it cranks and it doesn't give you that normal pop, 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 it's rhythmic compression. You can hear the compression. I would suspect something with timing. Now this is run on a timing chain, which I'll show you in a little bit. It's run on a timing chain. The timing chain comes from the crankshaft up to the camshaft, back down to the crankshaft, and there's a tensioner on it to hold tension on the chain. Now you do get chains that wear, and the chain can jump time. Now, after we initially sprayed it I sprayed ether into it to see if it would start, to make sure it was getting fuel. That's usually the first thing I would check. Make sure you're getting fuel. Carburetors can be, especially if they're left for a while, carburetors can be very finicky, especially with ethanol in the gas. They can get ethanol sludging in it, and the ports and the holes in the jets and the carburetor are very small. It doesn't take a lot of dirt to block them up. So sprayed it with ether, still wouldn't start. So after that, I suspected a compression or a spark problem. Now when I ran it, took the spark plug off, I put an inline spark tester on it. You can put the wire back in the spark plug, take the spark plug out and ground it and see if it's producing a spark. And it should be a nice bright spark, not like a dull yellow spark. It should be a nice bright white, almost like a blue, like a lightning bolt spark. If you see spark like that, your spark is good. So next thing was to check the spark. Check the spark on. I had really good spark. I could crank it using the battery and the starter, or there's a pull crank on it. You can do that, either one, to test it. So I had really good spark. So I know at that point my pickup is okay, my coil is okay, my spark plug wire is okay, my spark plug is okay. So next from that, we already checked the fuel, we already checked the spark. Now I'm gonna check the timing to make sure the timing hasn't jumped on it. So what I did was I took the crank cover off, I took the cam cover off, and in the crank cover there's a little hole, and etched on the flywheel here there's a mark. One is marked F and one is marked T. Now the T, when there's a little sight window on it, which I'll show you. There's a little sight window on the crankcase that you line up that timing mark on T, which is top dead center. So that is telling me the piston should be at the very top of its travel. That's when it's right at the top of the cylinder, which would also be the top of its compression stroke. And then when I checked the camshaft, when I had looked at this, the camshaft was 4 teeth off it was almost 90 degrees off. And I thought, that's not good, because if it's an interference engine and the timing chain has jumped that much, if it runs, it's going to collide the pistons with the valve. If it's a non-interference engine, the timing chain or the timing belt can break and it will free spin and it won't cause any damage. Now, when I took the chain tensioner out of it, the chain seemed really tight, and I thought, wow, I can't believe that chain jumped, you know, especially that type of distance, because the chain itself felt tight and it didn't have much wear on it. So I tried resetting the timing. There's a timing mark on the camshaft that's 90 degrees to the piston. So there's a mark on it, and there's a coinciding mark on the cylinder head that you would line that up. When I lined that up and made sure that the timing mark on the flywheel here was correct through the little portal, the T mark, not the F mark. The F is for firing. That's when it actually ignites the spark, because it will always fire spark a little bit before top dead center, so you get flame front. When I had both the timing marks set, and then I turned it by hand, and you always check it when you're checking an engine for time. Always turn it by hand. Don't crank it with the starter. I turned it by hand, and when I turned it by hand, one of the valves was hitting, and I thought, that is absolutely 100% wrong. It's completely incorrect. So I had thought at that time, it's not valve timing that's off. It's got to be either a broken crankshaft or a broken flywheel, because the flywheel was reading correct from where I had it, but the timing wasn't correct. So what I did was I took the crankcase off of it. Flywheel looked okay. I'm looking at the flywheel. There's no cracks in it. There's no breaks. The bolts and everything that are in it are all intact. But when I had it set, it was completely wrong. It was almost 90 degrees off. So what I did was I pulled the flywheel off, and when I pulled the flywheel off, this is what I found. You can actually see it. This is the Woodruff key, and it broke it in two perfect pieces. This is a key that goes into the crankshaft that holds the flywheel on the crankshaft in one certain spot. So what had happened was the flywheel had spun on the crankshaft after breaking this little Woodruff key. You see it sheared it right in two pieces there. Cut it in half perfectly. One half was in the crankshaft, the other half was in the flywheel. So a $6 part stopped the machine completely. Tricky to find that one. You got to do a little bit of homework on it, but it's all a process of elimination. You start with the simple things first. Try the fuel, try the spark, try the compression. Now when I had put a compression gauge in it, I put a compression tester in it. The compression was low, and it had one of the valves on it was leaking a little bit. The valve clearance for the tappet clearance on it wasn't quite right, so I had adjusted that. The compression came right back up. But it was, the reason why it wouldn't start, it wasn't valve timing initially, it wasn't valve timing, it was actually spark timing, because the pickup on is on the flywheel for the spark. So I'll show you in a couple of minutes here. There's a pickup bar on the flywheel that's basically a part of the flywheel that makes and breaks a contact as it goes around where the stator is. There's an ignition pickup on that case, on the other side of the case for the flywheel, the crankcase, and that's what generates your spark. So it was actually firing spark 90 degrees off. Now, the way I double checked it was that to make sure that my timing was, the way I found how the flywheel was off was when I set it to top dead center, I used a feeler. I took the spark plug out and put a feeler down into the spark plug hole, and when I did that, the piston was actually at bottom dead center. It wasn't at top dead center. So I knew right there that something was off, because it should have been at the very top of its stroke, not at the bottom of its stroke. So kind of a tricky one to find, but I thought I'd put a video together and explain what went on with it, because I searched for some information on it and couldn't find too much information on it. And I did not find any information on these keys breaking. I'm used to working on automotive cars, trucks, light trucks, buses, stuff like that. So this I don't usually see. I have seen pulleys that were stripped out, but to get a woodruff key that's broken, that's quite unusual. But hopefully when I get it back together, I got another woodruff key and I got another crankcase gasket, and we'll put it back together and hopefully she runs. Didn't find any other problems with it. I reset the valve timing on it. I reset my clearances for my valves, my lifters, and I'm going to put a new cover gasket on it. Obviously I got a new woodruff key for it, but I thought that might be useful for somebody else if they're having the same type of problem. If it sounds like it's cranking correctly but it's not, and you have spark but it's still not firing, it might be worth checking that position of that flywheel to see what you have going on there. Well, let me show you here what it looks like on the bike. Pretty well illuminated here if I can keep out of my own shadow. There we go. So there's the flywheel. There's the other side of my timing cover. There's the stator. Actually in the top corner there you can see the hole where you check the timing. Right in there. This part here, that's the water pump. And that's the water pump drive. Coincides with that little keyway there that drives the water pump on that plastic gear. You can see I have the new gasket hanging there. You see the marks here. The T is for top dead center and the F is for firing. You see I have the whole side of the bike pulled apart. So where that is, if I had the case on there, you'd be able to look through that little peephole after taking the pull starter off, and you'd be able to see that T mark there through that hole. And then up here you can see my camshaft. I don't know whether we can see the timing mark on the camshaft. It's right at the top. Where that little notch is in the top, it's right lined up right with that. If I can hold the light and the... It's kind of poor lighting in here, but... Let me see if I get my flashlight in there. Okay. That little notch that's on the very top of the case there, that's the timing mark, and then there's a line on the cog there to line up with that. And then the timing mark is here. There we go. T for time, F for fire. All right, let's get the light back on here. Yeah, there's a little bit of work involved in getting to it. You can see I had the step, the whole side covers and everything pulled off it. That's the stator in there. That's what actually generates your electrical power. This works like the alternator on a car. This the flywheel here has magnets in it. This is the piece here. That's the make and break for the contact, for the magneto for this is the pickup here, for the ignition pickup. So this is what generates the spark. And the spark plug is in the opposite side. You can see here if I come to the top, I turn my other light. Now the lighting in here is poor, but there's my intake valve. So you would adjust the nut on the top here for your clearance. Adjust your tappet clearance on it. But now I got to put it back together, put the gas tank in. You can see I took the gas tank, everything off, front cover off, because I had to drain the coolant out of it. It is liquid cooled, it's not air cooled. Well, hopefully we get it back together and everything works a-okay. We'll be able to haul more deer out of the woods with it. So yeah, sometimes it's unusual stuff. Sometimes it's not simple stuff. It can be simple as a bad spark plug and it won't start, but sometimes you gotta dig a little bit deeper. But I hope this information was helpful and helped somebody out. All right, here I have the cam rotated. You can see that little timing mark I'm talking about on the bottom of it. It's easier to see on the bottom because the fairing is really in the way, but that timing mark will be at that notch in the top that I showed you right there. That would be at top dead center. And then here's the hole right here where you would look through. There's a little cover on it. But you would look through there and then line up the timing mark in here. That's what I'm going to do. If I can get the light right. There you can see the timing with the T mark, the timing mark through the hole there, lined up with the notch in the case. And then if you look up here, my notch is lined up with the top. So now my flywheel is where it should be, my crankshaft is where it should be, and my camshaft is where it should be. We should be good to go. You see I have the crankcase back on here now, and the engagement for the pull start. Pull start would mount here. There's a little cover for that goes on there. So let's get her back together and see if she starts up. Almost all back together. Purring like a kitten.